Welcome to the replay section, this time outside of the actual deck profile. I know it's a bit annoying. I usually like to have the replays at the end of the deck profile video just to round it off and show a bit of the combo, show a bit of what the deck can do. But this time, well, with new decks, it's always a bit of a hit or miss. The first few 20, 30 duels are usually consistency testing, and with the consistency, I was absolutely fine. And amongst this, if there are replays that would show how the deck works, show the strengths and maybe some of the weaknesses that I could talk about at least, then I would include them in the video. But this time it was a massive mixture out of people surrendering after one turn because you were playing Tearlaments. They didn't care if you had like a budget build or not because they didn't really know. So they just were fed up with this in the first place. Or people just playing anti-graveyard decks. And I don't think I need to tell you much. A deck that is so focused on the graveyard stuff like Tearlaments in a best of one format, if you get dimension shifted, dimensional fissured and so on, you're not going to be showing off all that much. Yes, the deck can still do certain things, especially this variant because of the trap lineup. It does some stuff, but it's still lacking a certain amount of cards to actually deal with these kind of cards. Well, let's say consistently. So I decided, okay, let's play this deck a few more times. Let's see how this can do on the ladder. And actually, I have to say, fairly decent. Obviously, a lot of the time against the full pure super variant of Tearlaments that runs all the ultra rares, that is stacked up to the brim, you will have like a bit of a hard time, but not always. And this is what this replay is meant to show. And it will show quite a lot of strengths and quite a lot of pieces of the engine that I put in here that actually make this deck quite nice. Obviously, we start with a hand that is, well, consistency wise actually not terrible because we do have interaction during our opponent's turn with Havness, and we would have play starters even if we win first. So this is already quite a good hand. You could have worse hands because obviously the less Tearlaments you run, the less you will be doing when it comes to like graveyard manipulation. And also this will show you how the engine of your opponent's deck, especially the Ishizu cards, don't always just help them in a pinch. So we will be starting with our opponent actually starting their turn. So this ought to be interesting. They go for the Diviner combo, something that I do not have in this deck profile. And also during my deck profile, I said this card is to send Kid Colossus to the graveyard. Obviously it is not. Sometimes I stumble along my cards when I talk about the cards that you could be running. This is obviously to get your Ishizu cards going because this card only sends fairies. Something that, yes, I should have mentioned, but at the time I did forget and I did not want to record a 30-minute video again. Because also budget-wise, time-wise, I'm a bit on a budget because I don't have most of the time to actually record these videos. I do this just for you subscribers, just for you first-time watchers if you want. And well, they start their combos off with going full ham on the whole Ishizu engine. They already milled 2 of their Tearlaments, but they also did mill 1 of our Tearlaments, and we actually have another Aqua monster in hand, so we actually would be able to be doing stuff. And since it's the whole priority thing, this is something you really have to watch out with Tearlament versus Tearlament. Priority-wise, I think the effects that you trigger during your turn, you get to trigger the effects first. Sometimes that's very helpful, sometimes that's not helpful though, and that is something you have to be keeping in mind. So you get priority on the activation of your effects because they basically mill at the same time, and then you trigger them first, and they, in this case, they trigger theirs first. But sometimes, just sometimes, this can actually be to your disadvantage because then the opponent can kind of react to what you do and vice versa. It's a bit annoying. We do add our Rhino Heart to our hand because with Rhino Heart on our hand, this is the good chain because we did mill 1 of the traps. So we could actually add another Tearlament to our hand. And with this, we have access to the Tearlaments monster that needs Rhino Hearts, the big fusion. And this can disrupt the opponent during their turn and can possibly stop them from going off a little bit. Not sure, I'm not like a massive Tearlament player before Master Duel. I've not really played them in the TCG at all, so I don't know which plays are necessarily the most optimal, but I will be talking through what you could have done anyway. Now, you could have gone for any kind of fusion, you could have used Kid Colossus, but with the hand that I already had, I didn't really need the Surge of Kid Colossus, and usually you can do these combos of add like 1 of the Tearlaments to your hand, then mill 3 because Kid Colossus can then send itself to the graveyard, then you mill even more, and so on and so on and so on. There's quite a lot you can do, but this is mainly a play for your own turn, and also didn't really make much sense here, especially because I had access to this one, and your opponent has to deal with this card in some way or another, because if this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can special summon this card, and if you do, send 1 Tearlaments card from your deck to the graveyard. So I could have basically gotten anything. And the good thing is, this is still their first turn, so they cannot actually attack over this card as well. So whatever they end with, I already have one big body on board that can possibly deal with stuff. If they go, for example, for the Shadol package, then technically I could still be dealing with this. But they have Diviner on board and they have access to Baron, so yeah, they can be dealing with this, but they will be sacrificing some resources along the way, which can work out in our favor. So this is what I mean. They get to resolve their stuff like, well, technically second, but they get to activate it first. This is how the whole chain link situation works. Now they get to activate Kid-Kolos, and now, because they have priority, I secondly get to activate this effect. Now there's obviously two options. Could disrupt Kid-Kolos, could, well, not disrupt Kid-Kolos, could send Kid-Kolos back, or could send this one back. If I send this one back to the deck, they don't have access to Baron. If I don't send this one back, then they can do the whole combo of milling even more and combo off even more, because they can add whatever they have to their hand, and then also summon it out with Kid-Kolos, and this would also be annoying. They already used their normal summon though, so they do need this. If they search one of the Tearlaments and then use Kid-Kolos' different effect, then this is the only way of getting one of the Tearlament monsters that they would add to their hand onto the board, because they've already normal summoned the Diviner. And if they would do this, then they would have access to this one, and then this one would threaten mine as well. So I thought maybe getting Kid-Kolos back into the extra deck is a little bit better here, so they can't combo off with the Tearlaments too much anymore this turn. At least my thought here. Obviously, we don't know what is in their hand. And now I trigger the cards that have been milled on my side again, which is Shadol Skomata, very, very good, and Shadol Falco. There's plenty of stuff that you can activate always. Have a long chain of cards going here. We get Falco back to our field, which will be playing a crucial role later on in the duel. I'm telling you that already. Skomata, very important, because Skomata can send one of our little tech cards to the graveyard. See, they add one of the Tearlaments now that actually can special summon itself, but they still have to hit on the mills. So this is not something that necessarily has to be working out for them, in case the other one 100% works out for them. We get the Ariel play going, and we can actually banish, get rid of two of the Rhino Hearts, which is amazing. And well, this one, it does stuff, well, doesn't really matter, but we had to get rid of another one. Technically, what you should have been doing here, in my case, probably get rid of Poly instead of the ancient Ishizu card, because Polymerization in the graveyard is actually a bit dangerous, since Guardian Chimera then makes it be untargetable, if I'm not mistaken, and that can be very, very problematic for this specific deck variant, because I don't think there's that much non-targeting removal in here. So better play would have been get rid of Polymerization, but it is what it is in the end. They have their own aerial play, so they can just do that. They have one beast as well, so they also play some Shadol cards in here, which is quite interesting. And they get rid of some of my stuff, but I don't really care about what they get rid of. Not really crucial at all. Actually, it does kind of help. The one time it comes in handy that the effect of Tearlament's Grief, if this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target one of your banished Tearlament traps, not even cards, traps, and add it to your hand. And oh, look, would you look at this? We do have one banished Tearlament traps. Usually you can do this with your Ariel as well, banish one of your traps in the graveyard, and then this is how you could recur it as well. But this time they did this for us, so fun, because nobody actually assumes you'll be playing this card in the first place, because in a very, very good deck you have different ways to start your plays, but in the budget variant, this is exactly what you use. And like I said, they have Baron now. Obviously, they will be getting rid of my stuff. They could have gotten rid of Falco, but does it really matter all that much? Not really. They want to be threatening this one. And by threatening this one, because of its second effect, they actually have to negate it as well. So they lose the Baron negate, and they kind of end their turn with not too much on board, which is fine. It's not amazing, but we will still be dealing with some stuff because their hand is stacked. And we all know with Tearlaments, that means they are ready to go. Now, this one can also do more annoying shenanigans because Baron still has one effect that can tag out, and that gets Diviner back, or any Tearlament basically, and then Diviner obviously sends one of the other mill cards, and we trigger effects. Both sides though, again, and now Grief comes into play and actually adds me my trap back to my hand, which will be very, very important. We also mill another Celiac, so we can get more Tearlament cards to our hand. They only mill Rhino Heart, so pretty good for us. This is why I decided to go for a lineup that has quite a lot of cards that actually do stuff in the graveyard, because I knew lots of the people, like, this is the only chance you have in a Tearlament mirror match against the good variant, that you actually trigger stuff in the graveyard that they might not be running, because they run lots of hand traps, lots of like Called by the Graves and whatnot, so their chance to whiff is in theory a bit higher than ours. I mean, we do run the dangers and stuff, don't get me wrong, but lots of our cards do stuff in the graveyard as well and add us stuff to our hand. So this is actually very, very helpful. They get to combo off, we get to do some stuff, we get to act Havness back to our hand, very, very important. If this turn we cannot be doing as much as we want, and this will be the case, you'll be surprised what's going to be happening. I send to the graveyard the Grief because I only need one Grief, and that is quite easy then to get this card on board. Trigger the effect of my Rhino Heart, they trigger the effect of their Rhino Heart. See, now we get to do it first because it's our turn, so this is why we have priority, and now they get to do it second. If that's good or not depends on the situation, I'd say. They will be doing some stuff, they'll be fusion summoning, and they will be going into Winda. And this is usually where it's like, well, not end of the line because we already got Rhino Heart out, so we can still be doing one thing, we can still be fusion summoning, is what I thought, but jokes on us, they also have stuff in the graveyard. They will also be doing some fusion summoning, and that is a bit annoying for us because they do have the big one now as well on board, which is quite annoying at least. And we get to fusion summon though, we get to go into Kid Colossus if I'm not mistaken. It's the only one that we can really make here, which is good because we can be doing some searching. They will be shuffling Kid Colossus right back, basically mirroring the play that I had, and they'll get their Titanocider back, also a fun tech card that is still super rare though. It's kind of like Lost Wind, but different. It's good against extra deck heavy decks, it's bad against decks that only use special summon monster without the extra deck. So for example, against pure Vernisylph, wouldn't be doing all that much, I'm just saying. But obviously in the Tearlament mirror it can be quite nice. Since we now have used all of our special summons that we have for this specific turn because of El Shaddoll Winda, and we don't have any way of getting rid of this one, I just normal summon this one, so I have 2 monsters on board in case they get rid of one of my Tearlaments, so I still can use the traps next turn because that's quite important, because this one you need to control one, this one you need to control one, and this one you need to control one. Who would have thought so? So I felt like on board they were a bit better than not on board, and the rest I could have used all of these effects, but since I couldn't special summon anymore anyway, I didn't feel like overcommitting to the board. The would give me very little. Same for the Shaddoll Falco effect, obviously didn't want to be using that effect then because it does not much. But during our opponent's turn we have 2 ways now of turning Winda off for the next turn, which is Tearlaments Yu-Gi-Oh, because this card, very amazing, negates the effect, effects of one monster forever basically. It's not just for the end of the turn, it's actually the whole time, so that's very, very important here. And we have cards that flip stuff over and send stuff to the graveyard, so if everything fails we have still ways of going into our fusion. Very, very important. Get rid of Diviner so they don't have access to Baron again, which they might still be, but this is at least something we can be doing in that situation. And this card doesn't do much more anymore right now, so it doesn't really matter too much. They get rid of one of our ones. I didn't want to use the flip it down yet because I kind of wanted to reflip in this down and negate the effect of this, just so I can decide when I want to be turning this one off. And yeah, I kind of needed to flip this down because otherwise I'm having maybe a bit of a hard time dealing with it anyway. This card is destroyed. Now we using this effect because I thought they would be attacking with it, and otherwise I couldn't have stopped this attack and would have lost too many resources. I'll try to go for my fusion here, but you will see they actually activate Medora. I kind of saw this coming, but I couldn't really do much about it. But in the end, I kind of hoped they would be doing it this way, because if they would have decided to crash this one into this one, I would have had a worse time. Technically, I would have gotten more damage, but in the end, they would have still had to do the same thing. So what they're doing now is shuffle the monster that I need to fusion summon back into my deck, so I can't actually use it to fusion summon. This is obviously the advantage they have over my budget build, because I don't have this option. I can't really stop them from fusion summoning like this. So there is that, but that kind of concludes the turn. I still have, don't forget, I still have one monster effect negate, and I still have one spell trap or monster effect negate again, because I have lots of monsters in my hand, so it doesn't really matter too much. They send Sulik to the graveyard, so they get stuff. I think it's Havness, so they have stuff during my turn again, which is, well, I'd say reasonably smart at least. And in the end phase, I was like, well, if that is all you're going to be doing, I will be turning that window off, thank you very much, and use my, well, kind of infinite resource loop, that is Falco, because Falco, quite funny, you can just get it back. You send it to the graveyard, and it comes right back. And now there's multiple things you can be doing with Falco. Falco, when it's flip face up, you can target one Shadow monster in your graveyard and you summon it in face and defense position. And since we do have our Beast, our Ariel, or our Skumata, we actually can first of all recycle the Ariel thing and get rid of more stuff in the graveyard, because we can still send this card to the graveyard then by the effect of our Solyug, because this card can send other cards to the graveyard, not just Tearlaments, you just have to control one. So this can be an infinite amount of banishes if you keep the Shadow, Falco, and Ariel combo going, because then during the opponent's turn, you can technically send the other card to the graveyard then. Like Falco again, if you get Ariel back now, you can send Ariel to the graveyard if they still had a monster, then trigger its effect. Then during their turn, you can send Falco to the graveyard again, Falco special summon itself, and so on. It's actually quite funny, but keep in mind the Shadow monsters can only use one of their effects each per turn. Like not each per turn, just one of them. So if you summon Falco back and then they run into it by a battle, then the effect doesn't trigger, for example, because you have already used that one. So we have multiple different options here, since we can special summon whatever we want, but we know they have halfness. So I kind of wanted, before I commit to anything really, I wanted them to use their stuff, and they kind of whiffed here. It's not amazing what they milled, like it doesn't really do all that much. And they kind of had to at one point. Their deck wasn't that stacked anymore. Lots of stuff might be at the bottom of the deck from the last fusion summoning, and yeah, since that happened and they didn't really go into anything crazy, we know what the set card is, and we have an answer to that set card, and we've turned Window off. We were basically free to combo off here, because they only have 2 cards in hand that I don't know of. They could be hand traps in the end, but I just hope they wasn't. And then one time I actually get to use Tearlament's Grief, because this can trigger my fusion stuff without actually sacrificing halfness, because I kind of wanted to have this card in hand in case we cannot finish the game here, and just to gain more resources. Because now I can summon up Merely. I could have sent to the graveyard Falco, for example, instead of it, but I wanted to actually trigger the fusion effect, and I didn't want to risk whiffing on my mills, and my mills don't have that much crazy stuff left in deck, so I just thought, why not send it instantly to the graveyard and just go for the fusion here, and with the fusion, then I can actually go into the big one again. This time Rhino Heart gets banished from it though, because we have used the Rhino Heart effect to summon it back, so no shuffling back into the deck for us. Then they think, oh, Titanocider would be great on this one, because this is my way out of getting rid of this one. And yeah, but I still have the trap already set, and I have 2 traps for the next turn. So there's not much they think they can be doing. I think like we do have quite a good resource loop going. We would still have had this whole combo in our hands to be able to do stuff. We still had Kid Colossus in the extra deck at least. So there's lots of stuff that could have been done here at least. And that is for them kind of like end of the turn, because we also still have Rukalos then to actually go into further plays. I thought this, but I don't know why they're not. I think because Kid Colossus got shuffled back, that's why it's positioned differently than actually partnered up with the monsters. Also, I could still go into Windham myself to stop their plays, because I can still trigger like other Tearlament cards during my opponent's turn again. So there's lots of stuff to be done, and this is at the point where they do not want to see where this is going, and they just concede. So in the end, win for us, and we actually took down full power Tearlaments with a budget variant. Isn't that great? I'll show you one other replay where like do some other stuff, maybe utilize the dangers a bit more, because I've not done this that much in this deck profile, but I hope you kind of got a glimpse of how this deck can at least compete. It's not as broken as the other variants are, but for the fact that it basically costs you a lot less than the other variants, this one is fairly playable and actually did get me into Platinum fairly easily, so there's that in the end. And second replay, I will already spoiler you this one. I will be losing this one, and it's not necessarily against like a, well, crazy competitive deck, although in a best of 1 format, and with a bit of luck, this deck actually isn't too bad that we're up against. I just want to say I'm going to be losing because of very, very annoying circumstances, and probably because of a bit of inability on my part, but have a look at the extra deck. Oh, well, you can't, never mind. You'll be seeing what I'm talking about, and I'll be saying at the time when it matters what I was going to say. You can already see by our hand, if our opponent has Ash Blossom, then we are quite screwed. But if they don't have Ash Blossom, then we can actually do quite a lot, because technically Mothman's effect is going to go off sending this one to the graveyard either way. Either we'll be drawing 1 card and getting 1 body on board, or I'll be helping our opponent a little bit while we still get into our plays. So what obviously we want to be doing first is set all the cards that we do not want to mill, and these are those ones because they don't help us if they're in the graveyard. and if we want to get this one in the graveyard to actually start our combos. Because if we get a Tearlament on board this turn, we actually aren't too bad off. We have one disruption and, well, one slight disruption. I don't really count the whole Book of Moon effect as too crazy anymore these days, but it's still good. And we have a way of then accessing our Tearlament fusions, which is quite nice. And also we have Lost Wind, so if they play like a special summon kind of deck, we at least have that going for us. So it's like 2 disruptions and more plays at least. So there's that. Let's see what happens. They activate Max Z, so actually this comes in handy. We could be popping off afterwards, but we have to keep in mind, let's not let them draw too much. So in the end, it might actually be better for us here if the Mothman effect mills itself rather than summons itself, so they don't get a draw. We will be still using Mothman because otherwise we'll have no plays left. And actually they do get a draw off of us because we do summon Mothman. We draw into Foolish Bureau of Goods, another card that starts our plays actually, because it would also send Suliek to the graveyard. Like this, technically this is also a way to get Suliek back to our hand, because technically we can now send the other Tearlament card. Now I did go for Rhinoheart because I want to have Rhinoheart on board for the traps, but I did not activate Rhinoheart's effect. And the reason for this is, well, technically I could have activated the effect and sent one card to the graveyard. It might have been better actually, so I could have gone into the big one during the opponent's turn, and that would have possibly been a tiny bit better in the end. I thought if I don't activate the effect and then don't fusion summon, then they don't get another draw, and I can just do during their turn because we have this card. Was a bit risky, and I probably should have sent one anyway, but it is what it is. I do go for the Foolish Burial play and actually do add my trap back to my hand because that adds another disruption to my hand. So if they don't have Feather Duster, then we have 3 disruptions plus fusion plays on the board. Could have gone into like a rank 4 if I wanted to, but then I wouldn't have controlled the Tearlament and they would have drawn another card, and I did not want to give them more than that. They actually go into Gizmegorochi, which is now already telling you what they are playing, so keep that one in mind. They've banished some stuff off of their deck, so actually, yeah, it is like that. Which was quite nice for me to know, because now I know they at least have one monster on board. I can shotgun this whenever I want and instantly go into the fusion monster, which was quite good at this point. But also I knew this card could get me into trouble having this face up, because you do not want to be running into some crazy high attack point monsters, which will be happening because they play the rank 8 engine and the whole Gren Maju de Aiza, I think it is, you know, the banish lots of cards and get very, very big. And now look at what cards they also have. They have Gizmegorochi, they have Eater of Millions, which I will have to be dealing with because this card can actually rip my board apart. So I thought, why not start my combo line here, so flip this card face down, send my stuff to the graveyard, and then actually use the effects. They actually did have Called by the Grave, so it didn't matter if I sent one the other time or not, because they would have been able to stop my fusion effect regardless at this point, which is very, very, very annoying, because the massive thing with Rhinoheart is Rhinoheart's graveyard, if it's sent to the graveyard effect, isn't the same as the other one. So if this is sent to the graveyard and I don't have one of my Tearlament cards in hand, then I cannot get this card back and trigger the effect and so on, because you need to discard one Tearlament's card from your hand to special summon this card back if it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, which, well, spoiler, we do not have in our hand. Technically, I could have kept this in hand and done it like this then, but then I would have had one less disruption as well. All comes down to however you want to be doing it. It's already quite crazy that they have the Called by the Grave as well, and at this point it won't be enough of cards that they still have access to. Not only did they have Gizmegorochi, which is quite essential for their plays, they also can technically use the effects to get rid of my stuff, because they can still banish more, and also they had Called by the Grave to stop my plays. So I kind of have to be dealing with this one. I decided to go for Lost Wind here. I don't know if that was the right choice. I could have also gone for Suliek. Didn't really make much of a difference. I didn't want to sacrifice this card just yet, because if this is all they can do, then I thought, well, I would be safe and my Tearlaments would be safe, but spoiler, it is not all they can do, because you will see in a second why I'm a bit frustrated with all the cards they had at their disposal. There it is. Not only do they plus, they also get more banishing cards in. They draw Stromberg off of that, and they then get into another level 8. Obviously, and not enough with this one. They can pop one of my cards, so I kind of have to use the negate here. I do send, well, it doesn't really matter what card I send, but I think I do end up sending Mothman to them. No, actually, I did go for Rhinoheart here, but it didn't really matter because this card is dead anyway because it's a hard once per turn. And now they can go into their rank 8 place, which usually is like Numeron Dragon, and it does finish you quite quickly, but they have already only 6 cards left in the extra deck, which is very low on cards. But obviously they haven't banished at this point their main combo, which is a bit annoying. Draglubion plus Numeron Dragon, they obviously left in the extra deck, which is a bit weird. Well, I guess they thought this is the combo that they most likely will be able to finish me off with. But if they didn't have Golden Castle on before, and they didn't banish the one that they used as fusion, as an Xyz material, then yeah, it's a bit annoying that they still have all of this available. I know they can at least decide which cards they banish with Eater of Millions, but I thought they might have gotten rid of this one instead because they thought they couldn't finish me here anyway. Quite lucky that they did able to. And then if your fusion plays get shut down, this is where the deck doesn't shine at all, because obviously you get made redundant very quickly. It's not over here yet, but then you will be, if you don't draw into one of your massive play starters here, which I, surprise, didn't, but it didn't really matter because they had Macrocosmos as well. So even if I would have drawn into my Tearlament play starters that could have milled one or potentially done anything, I wouldn't have been able to do that either. And this basically concludes the game, because at this point, what else can I be doing? I can lower this one to 0 attack, but they can still attack this one, and I don't have any Tearlaments that I can get on board. So in the end, good game to them, but I felt like they actually did draw every single out that they could have needed at a specific point. And the Pot of Desires, I don't think I've ever really played against this deck that didn't draw Pot of Desires. I don't know how they do it, but it's amazing. I think they draw like, they play Pot of Extravagance as well. So yeah, this might have actually helped me if they had Extravagance instead of Desires, because then they might have actually banished one of those two. Well, like you see, this deck it's very strong and it has plays, and even if you had like someone bricky, you usually can be doing something, but also some of the cards that are run right now shut this down a lot more quickly than technically like the main variant, the one that everybody will be playing with the Ishizu cards and whatnot. It's easier to shut this specific variant down, but I guess this is what you get if you play budget decks. And yeah, hope you enjoyed the replay section today. That wasn't in the replay in the actual deck profile video, but I hope this is still fine.